How's it going, everybody? Jordan here, and in today's video I'm going to showcase a new fire hybrid build that does it all. It can assassinate, use its arrows to melt enemies, and engage enemies in melee combat and take some hits. And the best part is, this build is incredibly flexible and can be adjusted to the gear you already have or your favorite weapon types. As always, if you enjoy the video, remember to leave a like on this video to support my content and channel, and if you have any questions, feel free to join our awesome growing Discord community, or you can tweet them at me. I'll try my best to respond to as many YouTube comments as I can. Alright, let's get right into it. It's important to first address the fact that this build does rely on two legendary perks from the most recent Atlantis DLC episode, episode 2. I've been loving these new perks from the Atlantis DLC, and it creates a ton of fun new playstyles and ways to create damage in the game. We rely on the crit chance effects elemental buildup perk to instantly ignite any enemy we hit with either an arrow or our melee weapon. I chose to use a sword and dagger with this build because a single dagger hit can ignite your enemy instantly and begin to burn them as you hit them with your dagger. In the past, with fire daggers or poison daggers, you'd have to hit your enemy at least 5 or more times before they even ignited or got poisoned, and by then with a crit build they would most likely be dead anyways. Now with the instant elemental buildup from that legendary perk, you can use a quick attack speed weapon like a dagger or a sword and instantly light up a group of enemies, especially with the new fire spread ability. This allows you to sacrifice a little bit of melee damage or weapon damage, and they begin to melt as you hit them the very first time in the battle, still resulting in a similar time to kill even with a very high weapon damage build. This build doesn't have as much assassin damage as my other hybrid builds if you've seen them, but it does have enough to wreck any unit quickly, and you can mop them up either with a bow shot or melee strike. You can one-shot assassinate any non-elite unit and take about 99% of the health of any mercenary or elite unit. If this is something that bothers you, you can easily swap out the primary perk on your gear for more assassin damage and less warrior or hunter damage, and optimize it however you like. Also, there isn't any weapon damage with this build, so you can use any weapon types you want. So if you don't have a sword with fire and crit damage, then you can use a staff if that's what you want. I suggest you use daggers or swords though, because their quick attack speed applies fire much quicker than the slower attack speed weapon. Alright, let's get into the gear. Since I'm using the dagger, I'm using the primary weapon of the Atlantean blade, which comes with the default version of the game. This gives us hunter damage, crit damage, armor penetration, and then fire damage. The armor penetration helps with the quick attack speed weapons to deal more punch, but if you don't want to use this in another weapon, what you're looking for is any primary perk you want, whether it's warrior, assassin, or hunter, and then you want a weapon with crit damage and fire damage, and then you can engrave the armor penetration or any additional perk that suits you here. On your secondary weapon, you're going to want the same thing, which is assassin damage or warrior or hunter, again depending on which you'd like to boost more. Fire damage and crit damage are the primary perks for this particular weapon, and then the engravement of the crit chance now affects elemental buildup, which multiplies your crit chance to your elemental buildup, causing the enemies to instantly catch on fire. And then your bow is going to be the cursed bow of Hades from the DLC. This gives us warrior damage, fire damage, and then enemies you light up will light up all the other enemies engaged against you and the ones around them, and it'll quickly apply the burning effect and melt them like the previous Hades set that I showed. The engraving is going to be crit chance here as well on the bow. For the helmet, we have hunter damage, crit chance while at full health, crit damage, and then I engraved 40% fire damage. On the gauntlets, we have hunter damage, crit chance, crit damage while at full health, and then I engraved melee resistance for a bit of tankiness. On the chest, we have assassin damage, crit damage, and then warrior damage. Here you could also do the 10-second burning duration increase if you so choose, and then I engraved the Greek heroes set of 15% all resistances. On the waist, we have warrior damage, crit damage while at full health, crit chance, and then I engraved more melee resistance. This is enough melee resistance to be incredibly tanky tanky, and you'll be able to take many multiple hits in the middle of a fight and not have to worry about dying. On your boots, we have warrior damage, crit chance while at full health, crit damage while at full health, and then we engrave the 50% burning rate, which applies the fire per tick melting thing an additional 50% burning rate. So 1.5 times, meaning they'll melt incredibly faster. Alright, let's look at the abilities that I use for this build. I use both primary melee wheels. I have an assassin wheel and then a warrior wheel. For our assassin wheel, we're going to be using rush assassination, which works phenomenal. Our secondary ability is going to be hero strike, which takes all the assassin abilities and disrupts animations of any enemy that you engage with. And then our third ability is going to be the Chronos time shift, which is very useful for warriors, assassins, or hunters because you can launch yourself into the air, slam the ground if you're a warrior, or multi-shot from the air if you're a hunter, or even use rush assassination from the air as an assassin. And then our final ability is going to be Ares' Last Breath, which is a great healing ability that blocks all incoming attacks and re-heals you back up to full health should you take too much damage. For our melee wheel, obviously we're going to put flaming attacks to be the primary ability because we want to instantly ignite people, so we're going to need to turn fire on. Our secondary ability will be the first Hidden Blade DLC ability, which is Fury of the Bloodline, which brings some adrenaline back and deals warrior damage, and it's a great disrupt. It's the warrior version of Hero Strike, which makes it really good. And then just like the assassin side, we have the Chronos time shift here as well, and also Ares' Last Breath. On the hunter side of things, we want archery mastery, a maxed multi-shot, and predator shot, and between those you'll have more than enough hunter damage using fire arrows to melt and take out anyone you need to. Alright, let's look at the masteries for this build. Again, as always, if you don't have as many ability points as you do, just focus on the first ones that I mentioned, and then I'll briefly go over additional perks that you could put them into if you have more points. But in order to hit 100% crit chance, you're going to want to put 20 points into crit chance on the hunter tree, 20 points into crit chance while at full health on the assassin tree, and from there you'll have 100% crit chance. If you have the additional ability points after that, putting them into crit damage while at full health and damage while at full health will also increase your damage pretty significantly. If you're looking for more tankiness, putting some points into health, armor, and melee resistance will help out tremendously, as well as additional damage with putting points into fire damage or damage per enemy engaged. And a few points into damage dealt restored as health is always a good idea. Lastly, depending on what weapon type you choose, you can split points between swords or daggers, and I actually finally used the weapon swap ability with this build for the first time in playing this game. So I swapped between the sword or the dagger depending on who I needed to attack, and the main reason is because I'm not focusing damage on one weapon over the other. They both deal equal amount of damage. So these are optional, and depending on if you use a staff or a spear, you can also put the points there instead. And then I spread out a few points into assassin damage, warrior damage, and hunter damage in order to kind of round out the whole hybrid part of the build. So if we look at the stats with this build, as you can see here, we have 100% crit chance at full health, which will instantly ignite anyone we hit with a fire sword, a fire dagger, or a fire arrow. And when we do crit, we're dealing 667% critical hit damage at full health. Now, it's important to note that this also applies to people on fire. So the fire per tick also crits 100% of the time while you're at full health, and those fire crits deal an additional 600% damage. Not to mention the additional 218% fire damage that you get from this. And when we look at it, we have a nearly 88% melee resistance, so we're almost invulnerable to melee attacks, and we take a good chunk of range resistance, so arrows don't instantly hit us. But if you do get caught on fire or poisoned, it's good to kind of get rid of that as soon as you can, because those are the things that will deal the most damage to you on this build. Finally, we'll look at the main attributes here. As you can tell, I'm mainly focused on warrior damage. Assassin damage is the one with the least amount. It might be a good idea to transfer a bit of the hunter damage into the assassin damage to get that full assassination, but again, these are numbers that you can play with yourself depending on what damage you want to use yourself. But overall, you can play any play style with this build, and it's incredibly fun to do that way as well. Alright, so let's show the Transmog for this build as well. It's the first Transmog where I'm using the new looks from the DLC. So on the helmet, we're using the Isu Warden helmet. They have this gold variation with this gray plume that I think looks incredibly cool. For the gauntlets, we're using the same thing, the Isu Miradon Van braces, which has the same gold kind of Isu look. And then as you can see on the chest, we're also using the Isu Warden breastplate, which gives us that gold look as well. And then for the waist, we're using the Athena Promachos belt, which comes from the Athena set, which gives us that nice gold and white kind of waist look. And then on the boots, we're using the Isu Miradon boots, which gives us the gold Isu look as well. And then for the dagger, you can either use the Greek Hello here, or they do have a forged Isu dagger, which kind of fits the whole Isu theme. And then on the sword end of things, I like the Epsilon blade, or again, you can use one of the new kind of swords that you get from the game here, especially this Hunter blade, which looks pretty cool as well, or even the Isu sword, which also looks pretty sick as well. So that's totally up to you and what you want to do. Finally, on the bow, I'm using the Swift Winged bow, which is from the DLC. Again, it's a gold winged kind of looking bow, and I think it looks really cool. So that's the new Fire Hybrid set. The fact that you can instantly ignite enemies and the surrounding enemies on fire, watch them burn, and then use melee attacks or bow attacks or assassinations to take out your enemies is incredibly fun and makes you feel incredibly strong. And the additional melee resistance makes sure that you aren't glass cannoning either and you get blown up. Now, there are a lot more builds that can one-shot or deal more damage, but the unique part of this is when you scale back your melee damage just a bit, what happens is you no longer one-shot enemies, and what ends up happening is if you one-shot an enemy with a fire sword, it doesn't ignite the enemies around you. But if you take, let's say, 2/3 or 3/4 of their health with one hit, but instantly ignite them, you'll ignite all their friends around them, and they will all lose about 1/3 or 1/4 of health before you get to them, and you'll be able to finish them off with one shot. So the time to kill a group of enemies is actually, I think, sometimes quicker with a build like this when you pull back the melee damage versus being completely over the top with how much increased melee damage you do. So that's something to consider when using a build like this versus an extremely high DPS build like the Angel of Death build. They have their differences, and their ability to kill large groups of enemies are equally quick, if not this one's a little bit better. I hope you really enjoyed this build. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments, or if you have any other suggestions. Also, one thing I want to mention is I'm streaming an additional day per week now on Saturdays at the same time, and I'm also transitioning my streams to Twitch. So what I'll be doing for the next few weeks at least, or it doesn't work or my computer doesn't work, is I'm going to be streaming on both YouTube and Twitch at the same time using Restream, and so you'll be able to watch me on either one of those platforms, but eventually I will be entirely on Twitch. So if you want to follow me, you can go to twitch.tv/itsJordanDoes if you want to follow me. So I appreciate all of you guys, and let me know if you have any questions on Twitter in the comments of this video, or you can join our Discord as well. Again, I appreciate all of you, and I'll see you guys next time.
So proud of those born to be Spartans.